More than 20% of all cancer deaths across the U.S. are from lung cancer. It's a leading cause of death among all types of cancer. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray DuBois. I'm the director of the MUSC Hollings Cancer Center. November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and today we have with us Dr. John Wrangle. John is one of our physician scientists, so he both sees patients and also runs a research lab. He focuses on lung cancer in both those areas, so it's great to be able to talk to him today about his research and his patient care. Hey John, welcome. Thanks for being here. You know, this is Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and we wanted to talk a little bit about lung cancer. So thanks for coming in to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
So there's a lot we need to unpack today. We're going to talk about investigator-initiated trials and the kind of creative thinking that goes into developing those. And of course, for you, that's led to some novel immunotherapy treatments that you've been developing with your research partner. Mm-hmm. But first, let's talk about lung cancer. It was the most commonly diagnosed cancer in South Carolina in 2019, leading cause of cancer deaths in the state. Tell us, is there a typical lung cancer patient who ends up in your office? I know some people feel guilty about it. Some people, aren't even smokers and they get it. So it's a array of things.
Yeah, I really hope that the stigma associated with lung cancer begins to decrease over time. It's terrible, and our patients certainly don't deserve to experience that. 2/3 of patients diagnosed with lung cancer either never smoked or did the right thing and quit smoking, it's a terrible disease, and certainly our patients don't need to be dealing with that stigma while undergoing treatment. Tobacco cessation programs led by a lot of MUSC researchers have led to decrease in smoking rates across the state, and we're very grateful for that. But many patients will be diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer, and we're here to create the best outcomes that can be generated for them.
Mm-hmm. And here at Hollings, because of our cessation program that's so effective, we definitely want to drive home this message that lung cancer is largely preventable. Mm-hmm. And but as I mentioned, some people who never smoke still get it. So, but about 80 to 90% of lung cancer deaths are in people who smoke. So that's really an important factor that we need to remove from the equation. Absolutely.
No applying the brakes on tobacco cessation programs. But it's incredible that there are about 15,000 cases of never smoker cancer in the United States per year. This is a significant portion of who we see in our clinic, and we have very sophisticated efforts to identify oncogene drivers and to offer precision medicine in the form of FDA approved and experimental therapies targeting these very specific gene mutations that can drive these never smoking related lung cancers.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you need to tell us a little bit about your combination immunotherapy and how that was chosen to be part of the lung cancer master protocol, or lung map. But first, what is immunotherapy and what should people know about it?
So immunotherapy are therapies that are intended to stimulate your own immune system to kill cancer. So whereas we've all had tumors or incipient tumors that might have otherwise gone on to become cancers, our immune system is very good at recognizing and clearing those. Unfortunately, some tumors go on to become malignancies that our patients suffer from, and in many cases, augmenting the activity of the immune system, either through a variety of strategies, may help your own immune system kill your own cancer. It's a very different approach than traditional cytotoxic therapy, where the agent that is infused into the patient is intended itself to go and kill the cancer. Most of the combinations that we are experimenting with are intended to target the immune system itself in order to augment its activity to then go and kill the cancer. Sometimes your immune system just needs a little hand.
Right. Well, it's a very exciting area and has been developing nicely over the past 5 to 10 years, especially in some patients like you see that have limited other treatment options. And in medicine, we're always talking about novel or new treatments. So can you tell us a little bit about your version of immunotherapy and why you're so excited about your combination?
Yeah. So the novel class of drug that I'm working with is IL-15 and a drug called N803, which is what's termed a superagonist. It's a modified version of a natural cytokine that's produced in your body, modified to make it particularly active. It's administered with already FDA-approved immunotherapies. And the idea is to say, hey, I've got a patient who responded to immunotherapy previously, and that therapy may not be working anymore, or immunotherapy may not have worked in the first place. And what combination of immunotherapies may resuscitate benefit or extend benefit to folks who didn't receive it originally. So IL-15 is a member of a family of cytokines. And in my fellowship, we used IL-2 a lot. And IL-2 is a horrible drug to administer. It's terrible. Patients get very sick. They can end up on ventilators. But even in the 90s, it was noted that certain patients with metastatic solid tumors, melanomas and renal cell carcinomas, could be cured using high-dose IL-2. What an astounding fact, especially for those two diseases that were historically amongst the worst to treat. And so that was the inception of the modern era of immunotherapy using IL-2, but in a drug that's hideously difficult to administer. So we picked a family member from the IL-2 family of cytokines, IL-15, because we believe that the use of IL-15 allows you to stimulate the lymphocytes, the portion of the immune system that kills cancer, without stimulating the portion of the immune system that is regulatory in nature, the part of the immune system that squishes a immune response down. And that because you're stimulating portions of the immune system in the right balance, that makes it far more tolerable. And we can administer it in the outpatient setting, and it can be safe. And in my investigator-initiated trial, we demonstrated that IL-15 has anti-tumor activity in non-small cell lung cancer. And that was a first ever finding demonstrating that a cytokine can yield a tumor response in lung cancer.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And, you know, as I mentioned before, this is being tested as a part of the LungMap National Clinical Trial. And as I understand it, this is the first major trial under the NCI that's testing different treatments at the same time. And it could be this adaptive approach, but how does that work and why is it so important?
So it's very difficult to offer a sophisticated portfolio of therapies in a broad array of cancer centers. And the LungMap portfolio essentially is intended to become one-stop shopping for targeted therapies as well as novel next-generation immunotherapies. And so it exists under one umbrella, and then you just open new protocols as they are developed by the LungMap mechanism. So it's a collaboration between the National Cancer Institute and SWOG, and they generated this umbrella protocol, LungMap. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to write a protocol arm for it, in which we're testing in a phase 2/3 randomized control trial, looking at the efficacy of N803 plus pembrolizumab.
Yeah, I mean, that is very powerful because you can reach out to a national audience and
hundreds of cancer centers.
Yeah. And so this all started off as one of your investigator-initiated trials right here at the Hollings Cancer Center that we call IITs. And those are the cancer center's manna from heaven because we want to do as many of those as we possibly can to have the maximal impact. So that idea started out with you and your team and now has grown into this big national trial.
That's right.
How did that evolve? Was that a natural process or one that you had to just develop, bootstrap on your own?
So my scientific collaborator, Mark Rubenstein, and I developed the rationale, the preclinical scientific basis for the trial. So in the laboratory, we demonstrated that the combination could be effective. And then taking that data to a company, we argued that we could identify a population of patients that could respond to this. And the role of an investigator-initiated trial as opposed to a industry-sponsored trial is that, we all have specialties in thinking about different niches and identifying needs in the clinic. And the way I think about the need in the clinic may be different than an industry sponsor. And so we made an argument that we could identify a population in need and that could respond to this therapy. And the company that we were working with saw our logic and gave us drug and some money to do this trial, and we were successful. And so the role of an IIT is to bring the innovation that is observed directly in the clinic back to the laboratory and then back to the clinic. And it is a unique way of connecting the deep expertise of a clinician to a clinical scientific need in a way that is far more immediate and based on the expertise of individual investigators.
Yeah, one thing that I just want to say is this really highlights the importance of having an NCI-designated cancer center. We're one of the 71 across the country, the only one in South Carolina. But this is one of the goals of these centers, is to do this kind of work from the grassroots effort, and then which leads to a treatment that could really change lives on the national scale. So these cutting edge treatments are very important to develop. Sometimes pharma is not interested in some of these side approaches that we're being taken, but they can be extremely effective in a subset of patients. So that's why it's so important for us to have the center, to be a part of this national enterprise, and to allow sort of a platform where our investigators can develop these important, highly innovative approaches.
Well, this investigator-initiated trial has led to 2 follow-on trials sponsored by the company based on the observations in our investigator-initiated trial that are now amongst the largest national concepts being tested in lung cancer. So from a homegrown concept, it's become one of the biggest trial efforts in the nation for lung cancer.
And I know some of your patients have been unusual responders in a good way. So, for example, Mr. Hardy apparently had a wonderful response. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, he is a patient who might not otherwise be expected to respond to immunotherapy. EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer typically hasn't responded well to immunotherapy, though anecdotally responses are observed. He has an unusual variant, an exon 20 insertion, and he had a lovely and durable response to the therapy. Other patients have progressed on prior immunotherapy, come to and this is published, have progressed on prior immunotherapy containing regimens, progressed, and the typical clinical scenario is to reach for single agent chemotherapy, which has historically not been a very satisfying type of therapy to give to my patients, and observed deep and durable responses to the combination. And that's just incredibly gratifying.
Yeah, it must be a good feeling when you can impact people at that level. So we have to add that not every patient's going to respond, but this is why we continue to develop new treatments and combinations for others that may not respond to this one. And that's why our research mission is so important.
In my laboratory, a portion of the focus of my laboratory right now is to develop the science that helps us identify who is going to respond, so that we don't give medications to folks who we don't expect to derive benefit. Right,
and they're so expensive. So the flip side of all this, and one of my pet peeves is this prevention and screening for cancer. And that's one of our missions as well, is to push the screenings. And I know you've reached out and worked with our pulmonologist and our imagers and others to try to get involved in that as well. As an oncologist, does it help when these cancers are caught earlier, and what is your thinking about that?
It's the most critical element of treating lung cancer is achieving what we call stage shift. So to treat a patient with stage 1 is a wholly different experience than treating a patient with stage 4. The earlier the stage, the more likely that we are to cure a patient. And then, of course, typically in stage 4, we don't talk about cures.
Right.
And so early detection equals increasing the promise of curing an individual's lung cancer. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful and unique responsibility of an institution like ours to be involved in those early detection efforts.
Now, on a more personal note, what drew you to doing this work, and what do you enjoy the most about it?
It's the only job I've ever wanted. My first summer job was at MD Anderson. I grew up in Houston. Mm-hmm. And I was making bacterial plasmids in Pierre McCree's lab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Pierre.
And it was just around the corner from where I grew up, and I'd ride my bicycle and kept coming back summer after summer to that laboratory. And I can't explain why it was the only job I ever wanted, but it has worked out.
It's wonderful when it does, because it's really not like working at all. It's just enjoying what you're doing. So one question, I guess we recently had the Lovello Trainee Symposium, and they were asking all of us older folks where we got our ideas. And I heard at the Trainee Symposium you encouraged our trainees to be open to different fields and ways of learning. Do you want to comment on that? I thought that was really useful advice.
There hasn't been a perfect through line in my science so far. I trained in an epigenetic laboratory with Steve Balin and Jim Herman. My last story in my postdoc described a story how epigenetics relates to immunology. Some of my work has been working with biomedical engineers to develop early detection biomarkers. I had a wonderful collaboration with Mark Rubenstein, mm-hmm. A scientist who studies cytokine molecules. And what I feel that I bring to the table is openness and enthusiasm to scientific principles, and a hunger to see improved outcomes in the patients who I treat. There's no getting around the fact that treatment of lung cancer is suboptimal. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible disease, mm-hmm. And it is extremely compelling to gather curious people together and use whatever expertise they have to offer to improve outcomes for our patients.
Well, John, I want to thank you for coming in today to talk about your work. I think it's important for everybody to hear that there's hope and new drugs are being developed, and in some patients they're extremely effective. This has been a very fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it's a whole new era for lung cancer these days. We get to talk about long-term survival in a portion of our patients, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Wrangle for coming in today to talk about his work. This was a fascinating discussion. Thank you for tuning in to the Hollings Cross Talk. If this is your first time watching, make sure that you go to our multimedia page to watch past episodes. Thank you very much.